Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed Lee. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts, sitting in the shadow of the great Blue Hills. We are so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can help us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show. Tell your kids, teachers, the principals, the librarian, the youth minister, everybody. Tell them that they can listen to the show on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Audible, CastBox, Player FM, Boomplay, Ghana, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have two wonderful guests for you today. First up, Rory Grady speaks to Dr. Swain. And then later in the show, I'll be back to interview Heather Stigall. She is celebrating Paisley's big birthday. Before we begin, we have a big announcement. We have a brand new Reading with Your Kids certified great read, Akash and Mila in the Big Jump. Written by Anthony Deloney. It is part of his Owning the Dash series. This is a heartwarming addition to Anthony's acclaimed Owning the Dash kids book series. The book beautifully illustrates themes of resilience, friendship, and the importance of a supportive community. The story begins with Akash and Mila eagerly anticipating their first gymnastics class. They are excited to witness the impressive skills of the gymnasts and participate in the activities themselves. Their enthusiasm, however, is quickly tempered by the challenges of gymnastics, particularly the vault. Akash's first attempt at the vault ends in a fall, leaving him embarrassed and discouraged. Mila, witnessing Akash's fall and feeling uncertain herself, opts out of her turn. The narrative then focuses on their emotional journey as they grapple with their fear of failure and the worry of being judged by their peers. Enter Dash, an experienced gymnast and friend who, along with his friend Lulu, shares a personal story of overcoming similar fears and challenges. Dash and Lulu's support and encouragement play a pivotal role in boosting Akash and Mila's confidence, ultimately leading them to try again and succeed. We love this series. You absolutely want to get the whole series to be part of your family library. The latest book that is a certified great read is Akash and Mila in the Big Jump. Great addition to Anthony Deloney's Owning the Dash series. Get your copy today.
All right, greetings, Reading with Your Kids faithful. My name is Rory Grady. Our fearless leader, Jed Doherty, is out today. So today I'm joined by Dr. Swain. She's the author of the book, The Playground Leader, a book on how parents can model leadership to their children. Dr. Swain, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so good and happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So just to get started, very simply, what inspired you to write this book?
I actually love this question because it taps into two deep passions of mine. I am a mom of two incredible boys. They're 7 and 10 right now. They just had birthdays in May. And obviously that had a part to do with it. But actually my interest in youth leadership and taking a more holistic approach to how we raise our kids. And actually, to be honest, I feel like really in line with the vision of this podcast is, how do we lead from the front and in helping our young people become better leaders, like do the things with them, right? And I cover a lot of different topics in the book, but with that being said, the vision for the book actually started before I became a parent. I was working in community development, and that's when, it kind of inspired. I had this background in health and wellness, and I was working in community development, and together inspired my doctorate degree research, which was holistic wellness for leaders and communities. But those 5 years in community development, I was working with youth and families. And so in that process, I couldn't just focus on academics. Like in my mind, I'm like, we're holistic beings. Like how is their physical health, their mental health, emotional, social, economic, like all spiritual, all the aspects that make us up as human beings. And so that was really a big catalyst for me wanting to like play some role in helping families, which is the core unit that make up our communities, right? Just, be more healthy and whole. And when I say healthy, I'm not just talking about physical health. I'm just talking like overall in, just looking at what we are focusing on when we're raising our young people. And this will make more sense when I maybe highlight a couple chapters, but just kind of to pull it all together, what really then inspired that is, when I became a parent, I was thinking back on those in my 20s in community development, just thinking, man, like, we're missing out on so much potential when we don't look at our young people as leaders. They're not just taking up space. They're not just being kids. I feel like there's this massive amount of potential in what they're capable of, not just, in the things you normally think of, but in contributing to the solutions in our world, And so I just see massive potential when I look at a young person. It doesn't matter if they're in second grade or a teenager, 16-year-old or whatnot. Like there's just so much potential there that I don't believe is being tapped into. Hence the playground leader. That's how the book came about.
I mean, I can speak to the importance and the intrigue of this book to someone who isn't a parent. I just turned 24. I am not a parent. I did, however, just adopt my first dog. And, in pretty much all of the literature that I've consumed up to this point, what they really try to emphasize and drive home is the importance of starting early. And I think that a sort of through line to parents of human children is, I think that there might be some parents out there who think, how am I going to model leadership to this small thing that doesn't understand what I'm saying? So how can we sort of break that barrier?
Yeah, so I think there's several thoughts going through my head. I think we way undervalue the importance of leading from the front. Mm-hmm. So I love using analogies, and I feel like physical health analogies are just like really easy. But like I could tell my kids, that they should eat whole foods and move their bodies and do things like that and get enough sleep. But if I'm setting that example, it's not going to have the same weight as when and they're sponges. They're picking up on these things from when they're really little. And so if you are leading your life a certain way, it's just going to like it impacts. I'm actually studying the brain and the mind and emotions a lot right now. And so it's all like in my head, but the way that they observe your actions and even participate with you, like how it's going to impact your subconscious and non-conscious mind even, it's just amazing how our bodies work. So, when you're starting young, it's not too young to lead from the front in what you want your kids to live out of, right? So, I'm going to give a couple quick examples, but like, for example, I have parents always ask me like, how do you get your kids to eat healthy? Now, if you have older kids and you're like embarking on this journey, it's never too late, right? But you asked specifically about starting young. I didn't give my kids a choice, but I explained to them. I believed even when they were little that they had the capacity to understand what the difference was when you were putting good things in your body and fueling you versus when you weren't, right? I think having those conversations, another great example is, I talk about empathy in my book. I'm a huge believer that more empathy will change the world. Well, like,
Absolutely,
how do you teach that? Yeah. So how do you quote unquote teach that as a leadership concept to smaller children? Well, again, you lead by example. My kids were with me when we went and did things like invited neighbors over, went and did things that brought people together and community together. And then on top of that, as we got to know people and they had questions about things like, why does so-and-so whatever, we'd actually talk about some of those harder conversations about maybe not everybody, has kindness spoken to them all the time, or like, not glossing over, why a homeless person might be like over there, like actually like having these conversations with them so they start to think. Because another chapter in my book is on being inquisitive. Like, we don't want to shut our kids up from like asking questions. Let's say even related to this podcast, you're reading a book with your kids and they have a question. Like, we don't want to just be like, I'll just like tell them not to ask the question. Just keep reading through the book because you want to get through the book because you're so busy and you just got to finish and then move on to your next thing. Like, give them space to ask questions. And so when your kids are little and they're picking up on these things, like, oh, it's safe space to ask questions. It's safe space to inquire about people and empathy and feeling and all of that, then that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. I mean, also to the parents, I think that no matter what, even if you're doing everything right, leading from the front, you might face some resistance from your kids at a certain age. I think that from my experience, like 8, 9, 10-year-olds are some of the most stubborn people I've ever met in my life. So to the parents who maybe started later, or the parents who started from the day that their kid was born, but they're experiencing some regression, what is the approach then?
Yeah, so I have a 10-year-old and I actually lead this group of, like, I don't know why I do this, because I'm like, I say like I love being a mom, but I always give praise to like people who could, like, his third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, third and fourth grade teachers were like amazing. Like, how do you control a classroom full of kids this age? That's not my gifting. But I will tell you that I think one of the biggest, most important factors, when you get pushback on some things, because of course, like, I experienced that too, is to patiently give space to talk through things. And what I mean by that is I talk a lot about margin, because some of my other work, I actually have a podcast called Aligned Living with Dr. Autumn. The whole concept of this aligned living is to leave margin in your life for the important things. Like, I live in the DMV, right? So people are busy running around. They wear busy like a badge of honor. And I say, like, some of the most important things in our lives, and I'll really get to your question, trust me, we need to leave margin for. And so if you're trying to instill some things in the lives of your kids that, like, you're getting some pushback, it's a little bit challenging, I don't think we give enough margin to adequately address some of these things. So when I talk about like being a good neighbor, when I talk about, generosity, how much margin do we want to leave in our lives to actually do some of this holistic character development? I think, there's probably 10 different answers I could give to this question, but this is the one that jumps out at me is, I just want to challenge listeners, and I always challenge myself, is to leave margin in your life for those types of things. Don't fill up your schedule so much that when something happens and they push back, you feel like rushed and hurried, and it's really hard to effectively work through some of these bigger concepts if you just don't give space for it. So you want to continue to lead from the front, but I think like actually like patiently, like in our bodies, what we embody when we are present with them and want to talk through these things is completely different. I think we're just too hurried is my point. So it's not a super practical answer, but it is kind of.
No, I totally understand what you're saying. I think that, so my mom is a middle school teacher. She's taught math and English. And I think that as I've gotten older, I've realized how little credit I gave her while I was in middle school. Because when you're that age, all you're thinking about is, I'm showing up to school with my mom. My mom is at school with me all day. And then I leave with my mom. And like, that's the only thing that's front of mind. And I think that in general, like, I've thought just how patient she must have been then. And the fact that she does that every day, even now, that she chooses to be around this and like has to deal with those situations on a daily basis. I think that that's something that I've really tried to give her more credit for now when I do see her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would add one thing too, like as you were talking that I thought about too is, I'm really big on getting to the root of what's going on. And so if you face some pushback and you really want to get to the root of the issue, I actually heard, like, I read an amazing book that broke this down even better, but basically if you if you try to understand what's behind the pushback, instead of just addressing the behavior, maybe getting frustrated because you were going to go do something good and then they're getting mad and talking back at you, instead of trying to like discipline the behavior and preach to them why you're about to do what you want them to have a good attitude doing, I try to, speaking of empathize again, like, connect with what's going on, like deeper, like what's behind the pushback. Because when you do that, it's so much more effective in dealing with things going forward. Like what's behind the frustration, like for example, I have two boys and my youngest just looks up to his older brother and just loves him so much, but his energy plays off the older one. So sometimes he'll get really frustrated and do something to upset the older one, but it's not because he's mad at the older brother. I've discovered sometimes it's because he wants attention from his older brother because he loves him so much. So if I could in some way like bridge that connection again of like how things are better when they're getting along, it helps instead of just getting mad at the behavior in the moment. Does that help kind of,
No, yeah, absolutely.
Back a little bit?
I think if a listener is going to read a book by pretty much any author on the podcast, it shows that they're interested in learning about parenting experience. And I think that probably the best and most specific way to do that is just to ask your kids questions. If you want to learn by reading a book, then you should be able to learn by asking those questions.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So you also mentioned that this book isn't really just for kids, and that leading from the front means learning this behavior yourself. So maybe parents who didn't have a lot of experience with this in their childhoods, or at least be able to articulate how to do this, like what can they gain from this book?
Yeah, so actually, interesting story. When I first published and launched this book, I was like super excited, right? So I was telling my entire community, I didn't consider, are you a parent or not a parent? Do you want to be a parent or your kids adults? Like I didn't care. I just like wanted to share it with everybody. And then I had a lot of friends in their 20s, these young professionals who were like, yeah, I'll buy your book. I don't have kids. I may or may not have kids someday. But my point is I feel like the reason that this book could add value to almost anyone, even though some of the examples in it are very specific to parenting. I always say like coaches, educators, really anyone could benefit because we're all humans, whether 5 or 55, right? We're all humans. And if we're striving to be better human beings, like, which I think is very much related to being a good leader, when you're, all these characteristics in here, I think would help anyone be better, which then in turn helps all of us be better. Because I believe not only within us are our parts interconnected, right? Like our thoughts and our emotions, our physical health, I'm really big on gut health, like all the things are connected, right? We are also connected with our communities, like our family unit's connected, but we're also connected within our community. So a kind of an underlying theme of my book too is like the value of communal thinking in our approaches, right? Like, I'm not going to think about like an issue in my community or when I think about schools, for example, solely as it relates to me, but also my neighbors' kids in the bigger community at large. And if there's one thing I would love for my kids to really embrace, it's, that type of concept. So I just feel like in general, so many of the characteristics I talk about that we want to instill in our young people, all of us adults could really benefit from. But I think one of the other encouragements behind it, though, is also, whether you have kids or not, looking at young people for the potential they have. Like, I worked with teenagers, and I feel like so many people are like, oh, they're just taking up space. When they become adults, hopefully they're productive. Like 20% of the world's population, hopefully I'm not misquoting this stat. I think it's the world, not the US, but population is 18. I think 18 are under. And if we're just neglecting the value that population adds to the bigger picture, then, we're losing out, because I think our best solutions, even for what's happening in our communities or problems we want to solve, the best solutions, you want diversity of thought. And if we're not bringing young people to the table, man, we're losing out. And also part of their leadership development is, yes, as parents, coaches, whomever, we want to lead from the front, and we want to help our kids grow in these spaces. But I think sometimes we need to put them in spaces and empower them and say, like, we believe in the value you have to offer, so we're going to trust you in this space. We want to hear your voice, because you can't, it's hard to grow in a characteristic without having space to live it out.
I think that this is one of the kindest conversations I've ever had I think this is one of the kindest conversations I've ever had about my generation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that one of the points that you made in there is really important, is that this isn't just for parents, and like, it's just not, or even experienced parents can get something from this. Like, even, I guess I have a question for you specifically. Like, in writing a book about this, I think it's pretty safe to say that you're experienced with the values within it. But when you're writing something like this, does it help you to take a sort of inventory or be more mindful of these skills in your own life?
So, I think I'm tracking your question. So I feel like when you have a mission, because my work is a passion, it's not just a mission. Like, the Playground Leader, this book, but also my other work with like aligned leadership and aligned living, and just helping all people feel more aligned and being intentional about your leaving margin to grow personally, mm-hmm. Right? It's my work and my passion, so I have to live it. But I don't live it just because it's the brand. I live it because it's like saved my life, Yeah. So what I mean by that is, for example, I talk about these rhythms that we need to integrate, which could apply to anything. So if you are reading this book and you're like, I want to take away like the season of life I'm in, there's these 3 really important things that I want to take away. I'm going to establish rhythms in my life to be consistent and actually following through on those rhythms. Okay. Now, going full circle, as far as personally my life, let's say, I talk about stress management. I'm talking about health, like how the things that you should do in your life. And there is a chapter on healthy as far as it relates to kids and families as well in my book. But just personally, let's say I'm talking about these things, because actually, believe it or not, a large percentage of like illnesses and issues people experience are tied to toxic stress. This is really relevant to parenting too, because the things that kids are facing now are different than what we faced. So if we don't teach them how to, emotionally regulate in a healthy way and manage their thoughts and take care of their gut and all the things, like, we don't want like all this anxiety and all this stress. We don't want our young people to be dealing with stress in an unhealthy way. But my whole point is, like, eventually anybody is going to hit some time in their life where they're facing more challenges than the past, when they're experiencing more stress than they have. And when you go through those really hard times, then living out this like lifestyle will be like the feeling you get when you take a really deep breath. I'm a big fan of deep breathing, because I feel like sometimes we don't even realize our jaw is tight and everything's tense and we're lacking oxygen. So we're like lacking energy. I feel like establishing rhythms of like even managing stress in a healthy way could be, so essential to a life well lived. So heck yeah, I feel like, writing a book about it, these are things I already valued, but certainly it's reinforces just how important. I mean, I sat with this material nonstop for like 2 years. It reinforces how important it is to live it out myself.
Yeah. So I think, another thing I wanted to ask you about is, some of the longer term benefits of a parent who's, exhibiting these behaviors to their kids. That it's not just something that they'll see like in the short term where, all right, cool, your kid's cooperative about eating their vegetables and things like that. What are some of the benefits that parents will see longer term?
Okay, I love this question as well. So there's actually been a lot of interesting research done on what do we want to see in our kids' lives like as adults? Like, what are the priorities? What are the things that we want to see? Okay, I'm going to come back to that part, that question just there, because where do we spend a majority of our time with our kids now? Academics and sports and learning an instrument and all these things. No, don't get me wrong. Like, my kids are competitive athletes and I love sports and I love music and academics are important. All these things are important. But at the end of the day, what are some of the most important things that lead to their success? We want our kids as human beings in the future to connect with people really well, like the ability to network and be personable, the ability to care about your neighbor, the ability to be confident, the ability to take courageous, be brave, because we need to know how to fail forward. Everyone's going to fail. Like, how do you fail forward successfully? And health, wellness, flourishing, all of these things that were like, if I can write a list of the things that I really want my kid to experience as an adult, they're all those things. But when our kids are growing up, that's not where our majority of the time is spent. They go to school, they're focusing on academics, they come home, you quickly force dinner and like eat dinner super fast, which it's really important to chew your food well. So we're already at a disadvantage there because you're eating fast. And then you run off to practice. And then you're at practice for who knows long. Then you come home, hurry up, rush, and get into bed. Okay? Where is the margin to help your kids be the human beings that you want them to be? Those are your biggest priorities. Yet the way that our society has orchestrated the day-to-day life of a kid, there's not a lot of margin for that. So I intentionally don't sign my kid up for every single thing. I intentionally say no to maybe certain things because I know if I want to implement the things in this book, I have to have space for it because those are the adult human beings that I want to raise. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Yeah. So if there's one thing that you want people to take away from your book, like just from a good starting point, what would you hope that it would be?
Okay, this is a really, really hard question, but I'll kind of answer it as like, what is something foundational that us as adults need to focus on in order to be able to implement the things in this book, right? Like if there's a takeaway. So you read my book or you listen to someone's podcast or whatever, you take in some really good information. It's like going to a conference, right? And you're totally inspired. Oh, that was amazing. I have like all these notes of these great things I want to implement. The implementation is the issue, right? That's always the issue. Like this is why New Year's resolutions like often fail. There's actually, I think it's the second Friday in January is called Quitter's Day because people don't make it past 2 weeks when they set a resolution. It's my strong conviction. The issue is with implementation. So my biggest takeaway from my book would be to take care of yourself. Your kids are going to be better when you take the time to take care of yourself. Because when you are doing good things for yourself, then you are going to have more energy. You're going to have more patience. You're going to have more health. You're going to have more of all the things to be able to then have greater capacity and bandwidth to implement the things in the book. Or to implement whatever. And so that is like my biggest message or takeaway is like, okay, read the book, take away your top 3 things you want to make sure you implement with your kids or your family, but implementation's always an issue. I used to do health coaching for a really long time, and I will tell you, without strong accountability and conviction, why is you put so many things in place to make sure people actually implement what they want to implement, okay? So we need to do that for our lives, like leave margin, take care of yourself, so you have the bandwidth to actually follow through. So that is like by far probably the biggest thing, right? For me, at least of what I've seen.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like I've learned so much over the course of this interview. Before I let you go, Dr. Swain, where can people go to find out more about you and your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, but I'm most active on Instagram. So, and I'm always putting out like just additional random things that are all somehow connected to what I write about, but just extra value added. But that's at Dr. Autumn Swain at Dr. Autumn Swain. That's my Instagram handle. Also, if people want to email me or reach out, my website is just autumnswain.com, and there's a contact form and people could reach me that way as well. And so those are the two primary places. And if people wanted to follow my podcast as well, it's new, so not as many episodes as you guys, but it's Aligned Living with Dr. Autumn. So,
all right, Dr. Swain, thank you so much for joining the program today. Thank you, Jed Doherty, for letting me take the keys for the day. I feel like I learned a lot. Until next time.
Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. Before we invite our guest into the studio, I would love to invite you to visit a very special website. It's clownswithoutborders.org. Clownswithoutborders.org. This is a group that I absolutely adore. I am part of Clowns Without Borders, and I had the honor of being part of the 2023 tour of El Salvador. I had so much fun joining with artists from all over the world to bring a smile to people who really needed it and really appreciated it too. And we would love for you to join us as a monthly Joy Maker. The Joy Makers, they're a family of people just like you who love to laugh and make other people feel good. So please take a moment and visit clownswithoutborders.org and consider joining me as a Joy Maker. Hey there, families! Are you looking for an exciting way to bond and learn together? Look no further than our STEM is Family Fun video series. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of STEM through hands-on activities right in your own home. Our series features lessons from experts at renowned institutions like the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum, the National Children's Museum in Washington, D.C., and Children's Museum Houston. From making homemade rainbow bridges to creating an oboe out of a straw, there's something for everyone in the family to enjoy. So grab your lab coats and get ready for an adventure. Go to readingwithyourkids.com and click on the STEM is Family Fun link at the top of the page and let the learning and laughter begin. STEM is Family Fun, where learning and bonding go hand in hand. My friends, I am so excited. Our guest is here today to celebrate her new children's book. It's called Paisley's Big Birthday. Please welcome to the show, Heather Stigall. Hey, Heather, how are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm delighted to have you on. Tell me, who is Paisley and what was so big about her birthday?
Paisley is a bunny rabbit who wakes up the morning of her birthday very excited because she thinks she has been transformed overnight into a, quote, big bunny now. And as the day goes by, she is a little disappointed that all the big things she expected to happen don't happen the way she expected. So she wonders if it's really her birthday after all.
You know, I had a flashback to a couple of birthdays where I was really kind of disappointed that things weren't really any different than they were yesterday.
That's exactly where the story idea came from. Not from myself, but from one of my children.
Yeah. So this book was inspired by your kids.
Yeah. So I have 5 children, and my youngest, on the day of his 5th birthday, I had sent him to school. And at the time, I don't know if they still allowed this, but they allowed me to send him birthday treats. And they usually did something special for the kids on their birthday. They got to be line leader, and they got a crown, and they sang happy birthday. And so I didn't know, I just sent him the treats, and I picked him up at the end of his day, and he got in the car, and the first thing he asked me was, when is my birthday? And I thought, as a parent, I thought, oh no, they forgot to sing happy birthday. They didn't do all these special things. And he said, yeah, they did that, but he didn't believe it was his birthday. And this led to a conversation and me asking a lot of questions and him asking me questions. And I determined that he expected all of these magical things to have happened overnight. He expected to no longer be in preschool, but be in kindergarten. He thought he wasn't going to be in a booster seat anymore in the car. He thought he was going to be taller and have, I guess, outgrown his clothes. I don't know. He expected all sorts of things. And it reminded me, actually, I remember the first time I was allowed to stay up all night and watch the ball drop on New Year's Eve when I was a child at my grandparents' house. And I expect something really big to happen, because normally, you go back to school the following day and you just have to write a new date on the paper. But other than that, nothing seemed any different. And I thought something magic must have happened, at the time that, it struck midnight. But I was very disappointed to learn that nothing really happened other than watching a ball dropped on television.
It is interesting, though. We build up these things and build up these expectations and changes, and change comes so slowly and subtly that we hardly ever even notice it when it's happening. Right.
And that's what happens by the end of the book. She realizes that growing up takes time to do. So and with the help of her little brother, she learns that.
Yeah. So funny. And I love imagining and trying to look at the world through a child's eye. I think that's something, especially parents of young kids, I think it would be incredibly helpful for them to do just as a regular exercise. But I also think it's really good for somebody like me whose kids are now adults, just to kind of look back and think, what does this world look like from a 5-year-old's perspective?
Yeah, one exercise that's really helpful, actually, as a writer is to kind of get down on the floor and under the table and think like a child when you're actually thinking up a story idea, so you can see what it's actually like to look at all the knees around you. I always joke about little children, if you're around little children as an adult, and all the knees look alike to them. So sometimes you'll have a child, hold on to your kneecap or your pant leg, and then they look it up and they are so disappointed that, I am not their mom or whoever they were looking for. And I think, I'm so sorry. I know I looked alike from down there, but poor thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And the world really does look a lot different, at that level.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. Did you always aspire to be a children's author?
No. The first time I've always loved children's books, picture books in particular. And the first time I ever thought of maybe making that something I wanted to do was when the only time I remember an author coming to visit our school, in elementary school, and in 5th grade, Stephen Kellogg came to visit, and he's an author illustrator, and I thought it was just so cool. He was drawing all these pictures and telling us about, how he came up with ideas to write books. And I thought, oh, that could be something I want to do someday. And that self-doubt creeped in as I went along in life. And I thought, oh, I'm not the best artist in class. I could never illustrate. No, I'm not the best writer. I don't think I'd be very good at that. And the practical side of my brain took over eventually and thought, I need to get a steady paying job and do something that I'm good at. Not realizing that really we're all not going to be good at what we do unless we practice and we get better at what we want to do. So it took a while. I've always done things with children and always had ideas for stories and always made any excuse to read picture books to children or to myself. And eventually I decided, you know what, this dream that I had, why not? Why can't I do it? So I did.
Very, very cool. Now, I was very interested to learn that Paisley's Big Birthday has been translated into a number of different languages. We have lots of books that have been translated into Spanish, but your book has been translated into Dutch, Russian, Romanian, French, and simplified Chinese.
That's right. Yeah. So the publisher that published this book is actually a Belgian-based company. Excuse me. So they publish all of their titles in Dutch first, and then they publish it in English because they have a North American office as well. And they have a long-standing global reputation. So they work really hard to have their titles published in other languages.
Wow. And there's something, a few other things that are unique. You wrote that books are published a little bit differently, or the approach publishers have is a little bit different than American publishers have.
Yeah, so American publishers typically, they're in English first, not Dutch. So that's one big difference. But they also, if I do not illustrate my books, I only write the text. So in American-based publishers, usually they take your text and then they have a vision for who they want to illustrate the book, and they choose an illustrator, and I might get to see, sketches and cover sketches and things like that. But I usually don't have any contact with the illustrator unless I maybe friend them on social media or something. But it's kind of frowned upon to communicate with the illustrator because they want the illustrator to have their own space and do what they do best. And I completely agree with that philosophy. I have no business telling an illustrator what to do. I wouldn't want an illustrator telling me how to write. But in the case of Clavis Publishing, they did choose an illustrator, and they shared some sketches with me, but they said, here, why don't you meet each other? And we gave us each other's email addresses and asked us to collaborate. But really the only thing I did was introduce myself to Natalia and via email and say, lovely to meet you, but I have no business telling you what to do. So unless you have any questions for me, please, do your thing. So it was interesting that we were given permission and actually encouraged to communicate with one another.
Yeah, I was really surprised when I started reading with your kids back in 2017, started learning a little bit about the kids' book industry. First off, I was blown away, almost knocked on the floor when I found that it can take 3 years from the time a publisher buys a manuscript till the time it hits the bookshelves. That blew me away. But then learning that there's really little to no communication between the author and the artist during that creation process, really surprised me.
Yeah, it surprises a lot of people. It's one of the most common questions I've heard when I go to conferences. One of the most common questions from authors who are newer say, how do I find an illustrator? Or, how do I communicate with the illustrator to tell them what I have envisioned for my character? And of course, the answer is in traditional publishing, you don't hire an illustrator. That's the publisher's job. And you don't tell the illustrator, that even though you may have, like, I came up with this idea based on my youngest child, who is obviously not a bunny, so that's not true to life. But if I had made this, and thought of this as an inventive character, I wasn't going to tell an illustrator, oh, he has brown hair and hazel eyes and freckles or something like that. The illustrator could make it a girl or an elephant or whatever they want to do.
Yeah. It sounds like you have absolutely no issue handing off your manuscript and allowing somebody else to add their flair to your story.
I don't. I trust the publishers to do that. And in particular with Clavis, when I did choose them to submit the story to because I thought it might be a good fit, and luckily I was right. But they always produce really beautiful picture books, so I had no doubt that this book would be beautiful.
Interesting. One of the things, questions we've explored a little bit here on Reading with Your Kids is, are there differences in books that are published in South America or Europe as opposed to, in the United States? And we had one South American publisher who said that, yeah, the books in published in Latin America have a different tone. They might be a little bit darker than books published in the States. What about for, in your experience, are books published originally in Europe have a different tone than books that are typically published here in the States?
In reading some, I have noticed that, yes, there are some countries that sort of allow some darker stories. I've read some that have been translated into English because I really only speak English. I took a little Spanish, but yeah, the translated books I have noticed they get, I guess what you would say, get away with some things that probably wouldn't, American publishers wouldn't publish. Even in illustrations, sometimes there are things that you're like, oh, like nowadays you wouldn't get somebody smoking, an adult smoking, for example, in a book. I mean, an older book, perhaps. And physically, I've noticed a change also. So like even in the different languages this book has been published in the, right now, the American standard is to have a paper jacket over the cover. But in some of the, because they've sent me a copy of each of the languages so far. And in the Dutch one, for example, they kind of do a glossy hardback cover, but they don't have a separate paper jacket. And in the simplified Chinese version, now they did tell me that they sold magazine rights. And when I asked our foreign rights person, what does that mean? And they essentially said it meant a soft cover. So in the United States, that would be like you'd make a hardback first and then a hardcover first and then a soft cover. So that was interesting. And it was thinner paper. And they even changed the for the French edition, the cover, original cover in the Dutch and English has a sort of like a neutral tone with, pink balloons and things. And the French version, it's much pinker. The background is much pinker. And that I know of, I don't think they asked Natalia to change that. I'm not really sure. And I could communicate with her and ask since I have her email address, but yeah.
It really is fascinating. This world of children's publishing, I had the opportunity to attend the International Children's Book Festival in Bologna, Italy this past March. And no idea how big the children's book industry is. The event filled 5 huge convention halls with publishers from all over the world, and quite a fascinating industry.
Yeah, I've never been to Bologna, but I've heard wonderful things. And Clavis is usually there. I know they were there this year, so they're always there.
So you have another book coming out in 2025. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's called Gilbert and the Ghost. It's coming out in August 2025. I just got the release date. It is illustrated by Jess Mason, who, again, I have followed her on Instagram, but beyond that, not communicating. Being published by Beaming Books, and is about a boy named Gilbert who believes that there is a ghost that lives in the house down the street from him, and he is convinced that they want to be friends. So he does everything he can to be friends with the ghost, even though everyone around him doubts it.
I think I'd want to be friends with the ghost too. I certainly wouldn't want to be enemies with the ghost.
Exactly. I agree.
Wow. Where did the inspiration for this new book come from?
Honestly, I had a different title for it, and the title came first. They've changed the title, and it makes complete sense to change the title. But my ideas come from all over the place. Sometimes it's a character, sometimes it's a true event that I change into a story. In this case, it was a title, and then I came up with a story to go with the title because I thought the title was great. And then the title was Ghostwriter, no secret, and I thought, oh, that's clever. Adults will understand the joke, even though children might not. But then when I decided, well, who would be writing to a ghost, or why would a ghost be writing? I kind of invented some ideas in my head, and I thought, well, I would think that somebody who would maybe want to write to a ghost would be somebody who felt invisible themselves. And so that's how I kind of came up with the character of Gilbert, who feels a little invisible around other people. And he thought, he wants to be a good friend to somebody who, takes the effort to reach out for him and really believes in friendship. So that's where the idea came from.
Such a neat message. Isn't it amazing when you take the time to truly acknowledge not only a kid, but another human being, how important it is to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Great lesson for kids and for adults. It would be a great lesson for us if you told us where we can go to find out more about Paisley's big birthday and find out more about you.
Sure. I have a website. It's www.heatherpierce.Stigall. So the Pierce is spelled like pierce your ears, P-I-E-R-C-E, and the Stigall is S-T-I-G-A-L-L.com. I'm also on all the social media handles, but you can find all of that on my website.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Paisley's Big Birthday. Our guest has been Heather Stigall. Heather, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and that it inspired you to join us for the next exciting episode of the show. We also hope it inspires you to write a review of Reading with Your Kids on whatever podcasting app you're listening to. And if you're listening on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, let the folks at your local station know that you love Reading with Your Kids, please. Again, a 5-star review on iHeartRadio, Amazon, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. It really helps people find the show. And of course, if they find the show, they can join in our universal mission to help all families grow closer through reading. And we know how valuable having readers in the world are. It's a great way to make the world a better place. We would really love for you to join us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram and TikTok, and at Jedley Magic on Twitter. We have a great YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids, and you can find all of our STEM is Family Fun and Drawing with Your Kids videos on our YouTube channel. We'd love for you to visit our website as well, readingwithyourkids.com. You can check out our blog. You can find the full review of Anthony Denalini's new Certified Great Read on our blog. You can also visit our Certified Great Read Wall of Fame. See all the books that have earned this prestigious seal of approval. You can also find a link that will get you to every episode of Reading with Your Kids, all 2,000 plus episodes of Reading with Your Kids. You know, a lot of schools are already back at school and or will be back at school soon. We have a new initiative where we are wanting to work with schools to launch their own school podcast to promote literacy and promote better communication between schools and homes. If you're an educator or if you are a parent, please check out at readingwithyourkids.com and click on Your School Needs a Podcast button to find out more about it. If you're an author, please be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com and click the Authors Click Here button up at the top of the page. That way you can find out how you can be a guest. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, it gives you the chance to tell thousands of Kidlit fans all about your great kids book, and it doesn't cost a thing. You can also learn about our great author services. They're really effective and very affordable. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we'll start by thanking our guests, Autumn Swain and Heather Stigall. I especially want to thank my guest host today, Rory Grady, great member of our team. Thanks, Rory, for interviewing Dr. Swain. I want to thank the rest of my team, Chris Doherty, Fatima Khan, Judy Hu, Stella Sheree, Hannah Bosanj, Alyssa Montiero, Devin Hill, Riley Oluwu. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids. But right now, my buddy Chris Hardy's going to give us a little audio preview of a new podcast we are working on called Real Magic.
Kindness is quite magical, and respect is magical too. When you travel as much as Jedley does, the magic comes right through. But he's not alone in his quest, he's got some helpers in his crew. 3 dogs show and bring it right to you. Real Magic Podcast. It's so much fun in many ways. Real Magic Podcast. Tune in and you'll be amazed. Gently leads the charge as a magician and a bit of a clown. Calvin is a goofy pit bull who never seems to be down. Augie is a grumpy old beagle, or is he really a basset hound? And Daisy is a border collie wiener dog that knows her way around.